Hello guys, and welcome once again to Savannah Essence. If you are interested in learning how to use natural plants or botanicals in your soap making journey, then this video is excellent for you. Kindly stay tuned, okay? Thank you. So I'm using just one plant to make the demonstration, and I am doing this so just that you see the difference that using just one plant or using just one plant in different ways will give you different results in soap making. Now I'm using fresh neem leaves and fresh neem powder. All these are made by us here at Savannah Essence. So the neem tree is right in front of my house, and the neem powder, we make it here at Savannah Essence. You can get onto our website www.savannahessence to buy your neem powder. Now what I do first is to wash my fresh plants, in salt, and then you blend it and then you start. Now I'm going to make 4 different variations, 2 using the fresh and then 2 using the powder. Now this soap is 100% coconut soap, and it's a super fats, with a 20% super fats, so it doesn't dry out your skin. You can try this out. I'm not going to share the recipe. If you want to get this recipe, like I'm saying, it's 100% coconut soap with a 20% super fats. Use the how to use soap calc video and then input these details and see what you get. The oil badge is 100 grams. So we start off by measuring our water. Now for the first part, I'm doing 100% water replacement, and so what that means is that what I'm going to use to dissolve my lye, which is the water, I'm replacing all of that with the neem puree, the fresh neem leaves that I have blended. I am going to use that to replace the water. Again, the water quantity for this soap is 30%. Okay, so this is 30%, and I'm going to make them in small batches so that you get the sense of what I'm trying to communicate. So now that I've measured my 100% neem puree, I pour in my lye, I mix it, I let it dissolve, and then I start my soap making. So this is the technique I used in my video on how to make neem soap. It is simple, it's straightforward. The only advice I'll give is that if you're a beginner, pour in your lye bit by bit. If not, you get a brown solution so quick like I have in this case. So you pour it bit by bit and you let it dissolve bit by bit so it doesn't scorch your puree and give it that brown color like you're seeing. So this is first batch. I'm setting this aside. I'm prepping the second batch. The second batch, instead of using 100% water replacement, I am using a 50% water replacement. What that means is that I'll use some of the neem puree and then I'll use some parts as water. Another significant difference is that instead of mixing the lye in the neem puree, I am going to wait. When this soap traces, then I'll pour in the neem puree as a form of a colorant at the end of the soap making journey. So this is the significant difference between this one and the second one. Number 1, it is a 50% water replacement, and number 2, we are adding the soap puree at the end when the soap has reached a trace instead of at the beginning when we mix it in the lye water. So this is another technique you can use as a beginner. It's very helpful, it's straightforward, it gives you that nice green vibrant color that you would expect to see in a neem soap. So this is my 50% water. Again, if you have watched my how to use soap calc video, this is a clear example of using the water to lye ratio bit as against using the water as percentage of oil. Now as you can see, I'm using a 1:1 ratio. I'm using equal parts of lye to equal parts of water. Another thing to note is that this is the minimum amount of water you can ever use in soap making. You cannot have a case where your amount of lye is more than the amount of water. It will not dissolve and you have lye crystals in your end products. So the minimum you can get is that. So now I'm pouring in the first technique, which is the 100% water replacement, into my oil. I'll stick blend it and then I'll pour it into my soap molds. I am not using fragrance because fragrance has a tendency of coloring your soap or discoloring your soap. Some fragrances, especially those that contain vanilla. And so to give you an example of what this entails or what you are likely to see in your final products, I want to just do it with no fragrance, so you get the idea of what I'm talking about. So what I'm going to do is stick blend it, and when it's done, I simply pour it into my soap mold. And the first stage, or the first part of this, which is our 100% water replacement Neem soap, is done. Like I said, make sure that you pour your lye bit by bit so you don't get it as dark as this is. But generally it will still be a dark soap. 100% Neem soap, Neem, using fresh Neem leaves, will give you a very dark soap. So this is experiment 1. Let's move on to the second one. Again, for beginners, if you've heard something about water discount, this is a clear example of a water discount. Like I said, this recipe calls for a 30% water. So that's what the recipe entails. So you use 30% water. This is water as percentage of oil. So if the oil is 100 grams, then that means the water is 30 grams. But in this case, I have discounted the water, and this is what we call a water discount. So we are using 15% instead of the 30%, and that is what we call a water discount. Again, like I said, we have stick blended the soap. It has reached the trace. This is now the time we are adding the neem puree, as opposed to the first technique where we put the lye in the neem puree and then we added it into the oil and then stick blended. This time around, we are doing it the other way, and I just want you to clearly see the contrast in the color. This gives you a very clear, deep green, beautiful color, as opposed to the very deep, dark green the 100% one gave. Again, when you add lye directly into botanicals, it scorches them. Whether it is neem, it is moringa, whether it is carrots, it is tomatoes, whatever it is, once it's fresh from nature, you add it. Most of them are heat sensitive. Once you directly add it to it, it scorches the color. So if you want to maintain the color, then use the second technique. So we are done with the fresh neem leaves. Now we are going into the neem powder. Again, for the neem powder, the prep is almost, the technique is a little bit different. If you have watched my making activated charcoal soap, if you watched how to make the turmeric soap, all these ones use this first technique that I'm using in terms of the powders. What happens is that you make your soap, once it traces, then you add your powder to it. That is usually the normal technique that most of us as soap makers use. So this is one technique that I would like to show. This is a very beginner friendly soap making. You do not have any problem. The only problem with this is if you have a very bad fragrance that lets your soap traces fast, and I shared a video of that in my failed soap, which is the cocoa soap that I made, the failed one. You realize that once there was a problem with the fragrance and it accelerated, there was a problem with the coloring, adding the coloring at the end part. And so this is the only problem with this particular technique. So my soap has reached the trace and I'm going to add my powder. It's as simple as that. Once I'm done, I pour it and it's done. The convention is usually to use 1 teaspoon per pound of oil. So for every pound of oil, you use 1 teaspoon of the powder. However, we do not use pounds. So usually if you want to rely on the convention, that will be around 1.5 teaspoons per 1 kilogram of oil. Now look at the color here of this one too. See how green and vibrant that color also is. Quite beautiful, if I might say, as against the other two. However, let me pour it in and you also see the quick color contrast between the three. Now that is quite telling, isn't it? So that's the third one. Now we are on the final parts of the soap making journey. Another thing that I am doing is when I pour and there's a leftover, I pour and then I add the other one. I think you might have noticed that. Okay, so for the fourth and final technique, we put the powder in the oil before you add your lye water to it and stick blend it. The difference between this one and the other one is that the other one, you make your normal soap, you stick blend it, and then when it reaches a trace, you add your powder. This one, we are adding the powder to the oil. We blend it and then we add the lye water to it. This technique helps you once you have a very bad fragrance, that lets your soap to accelerate. So in my failed soap technique, if I had done this way, added my cocoa powder to my soap and added my fragrance, when it was just rising, I would just pour it into the mold and not have had the issues I had with it. Now look at the color contrast. These are 4 different techniques. The same tree, which is the neem tree, it has managed to give us 4 different color variants. They are all green, yes, but the color difference is quite unique and different for each of the techniques. Okay, and that's the beauty of using botanicals. And so we wait for 24 hours and then we will show you what it looks like. So this is the second day, and let's have a look. This is our 100% water replacement soap. You see how it is. Next, we have our powder in or after trace. This is the one we added the powder when the butter traced. Okay, so you see that also give you a very beautiful green shade. Now the next one is the powder in oil. This one we added the powder in the oil before we added the lye water. This gives you a very vibrant green color. And then I'm adding the powders together, putting the powders together. And then our 50% water replacements, and then this gives you a light vibrant green color. So ladies and gentlemen, this is the final of the 4 techniques that we used in our soap making. Now as you can see, it gives you all these nice green shades. My sister will say you might use route A, B, C, D, but if the destination is Z, whichever technique you use, you definitely get to your Z. So it all gives you, when we're pouring, the color, the differences in the greens were quite obvious. But as it hardens and it cures, you start to realize that it all gives you the same shade of green when it comes to the differences are there, but the shade of green looks the same. Okay, and so this is the beauty of using botanicals. It might give you a different contrast, but at the end of the day, this is what it gives. And also the reason why I like to use botanicals is that, for instance, neem has different properties. It has antibacterial, antifungal, antioxidants in them. And granted that during saponification, it loses some of these properties, but some still remain. And so these botanicals are excellent for your skin. And then the beauty of it is that it adds color to your soap. And so you do not need other unnatural pigments to color your soap. For those of us in Africa or in Ghana who have the benefits, I have trees all around my house that I use in making soap. I explore. I do not want to use micas. Again, where we are, micas are quite expensive. And so I prefer to use the botanicals. And so they give you this beautiful color contrast, and they also have excellent and amazing skin properties. So I hope this video has been helpful. If it has been helpful, the only way you can also help us is to subscribe to our channel. We are still recording our beginner soap making playlist, and I hope this has really been helpful. Another thing to note is that as soap cures, it begins to darken, and so this might brown or darken as the days go by. Finally, do note that you can use this technique not just for botanicals, but for micas, for different powders such as activated charcoal soap, for turmeric. If you have your fresh turmeric, you can use any of these techniques to make your soap. So this is not just limited to natural plants or just botanicals. This can be used for a variety of powders, micas, and pigments. Thank you very much for watching our video. We hope you've subscribed to this channel, and we hope this has been helpful. Have a nice day.